Hi everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today we are starting in on some batches of homemade applesauce. I've got these beautiful apples from my tree. They cook down beautifully for applesauce without hardly any blending, chopping. I just quarter my apples to cut out the cores just to help get a little less seeds, and we found that the hard hulls around the seeds don't always come out so well in the food mill. So I've got my pot all full. I usually take about a half a mason jar of water and add it to the bottom of my pot just to make sure that I don't have any scorching before the juices start to release. So I was able to get an extraordinarily early start on my day today. So I've already done 2 other pots of apples. I just added that one onto the stove under medium heat with a little bit of water. And these have been cooking on medium for probably about 20 minutes while I've been filling some other pots. And to add to my batch, I went ahead and filled up my crock pot, and I put this one on high, and the color of those skins have changed a lot. They actually look like red skin potatoes right now. So we're gonna soften them up a little bit more, and then I'm gonna start chopping things with my chopping blade. It really helps smooth it out. It's a little bit noisy, but it's well worth it. I believe it's a lot more pleasant to do it this way than putting an immersion blender in, just because the flesh from the apple really helps separate very easily. I've got my lids and bands and my jars all ready to go. I'm set up with my canning station. After I have a little more space on my stovetop, I will fill this with water and a tablespoon or 2 of vinegar to help with any hard water collecting on the outsides of the jars. So that's something else I'm going to work on while those apples are cooking. And I'll tell you, with a morning like this going on, I'd rather be in here in the warm than out there having to pick the apples and start in on my chores just after sunrise. A thing to keep in mind is every type of apple cooks in a different amount of time, also depending on how large you decide to chop your chunks. So I pretty much quartered mine, and you can see some of this is already breaking down into applesauce. I don't want my liquid or my juices from my apples to turn into a big pulpy mess, because then you'd have really watery applesauce, and that would separate during the canning process. So I've got this really big scoop colander, and if you had a big like sink colander, you could pour this pot right into that. I just scoop it out a little at a time. Give it plenty of time to let that drip and drain. And like I said, you could stick an immersion blender right down in there, but then you're going to have watery applesauce. So I'm just going to pulse this real quick and just go to where you want your texture of applesauce to be, thick or chunky. Now I'm going to be running it through the food mill. I've got that set up here as well. I prefer to have my food mill right on the top of this pot because it's a heavy bottom. I'm going to have to transfer things around from bowl to bowl until my pot is empty, because I wanted to do as large a canning day today as possible. So that looks pretty good. And then the food mill will help remove any skins from this. Now you see it's slightly pinkish colored. If you don't want any coloring to your applesauce and you just want it to look that kind of yellowish whitish, peel your apples. I like that the kids are getting a little something from that, and honestly, a lot of the skins fall off anyway, but you can see that color just came right off of that apple during the cooking process. So for the most part, like a skin like that would get chopped up in here, but then it's such small bits that some of it does go through the food mill, and it's good for the kids' bellies and good for mine. So while I have my food mill process set up and I'm working on that, I am sanitizing my jars in my water bath canner. So I've got this filled with water and vinegar. I'm going to lower these down with the lid on. And basically I'm preheating my water from my water bath canner because you want your jars, your water, and your contents of your jars all to be about equal temperature. So after the food mill, I'm actually going to put that pot back on the stovetop to get it heated up. But this amount of water takes so long to heat up on an electric stove that it is sanitizing my jars and preheating at the same time. It's a great process. Also, a quick tip for you, this liquid is full of natural pectin. So if you don't want to buy pectin at the store, you can add that liquid to your fruit in your next batch of jam or jelly, and that will help set up your fruit. The pectin is all naturally found in the cores and the skins of the apples. So this is a good homesteading tip to get you further in that homesteading journey and get you kind of out of the grocery store on some of your other endeavors. So last week I made strawberry rhubarb jam. If I had made my applesauce first, I wouldn't have needed the store-bought jam. So I can use this pectin, I can freeze it, I can can it, I can just put it up for the next batch of anything that I'm going to make. And I know that I've got some elderberries in the freezer that are gonna need some pectin. So after you've used your food mill, I advise you, it doesn't just get clogged. If you go in reverse, see right there, that scrapes that bottom clean. I'll back it up and show you. See there? And puts it right on top of the paddle. So you can save that and feed it to your chickens, livestock, whatever you prefer. Or you can put it aside and make an applesauce cake. Those skins, it just all cooks down so much when you do any baking with it. Muffins, biscuits, you can do like an apple cinnamon bread. Yum, it's making me hungry.
What do you need that for? Never mind, it's like
Okay, so when your contents of your pot reach the bottom of your food mill, it's going to stop going through. So it's time to put this pot on the stove, bring it up to a hot boil type temperature. I don't want it splattering all over, so keep an eye on it. Or you can put this in the crock pot, season it for apple butter. This is the first step in making apple butter. And you can catch that video I made a couple of days ago. So you can catch that video by going to the homesteading playlist and find it there. And as you can see, that skin made it a nice pink applesauce. If you want to season it with cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg, cloves, this is the time to do it while you're heating it up on the stove top. Also, if you want to add sugar, this is the time to do it also. We do ours unsweetened. We find it a nice sweet flavor with the apples that we choose. We don't know the variety of our apples. I had mentioned that in a previous video. We just know which trees are sweet, which ones work great for applesauce or cider, and how to mix them up to get the flavoring that we like. Okay, so my applesauce pots are full. I rotated some things around and I put all of my applesauce into my red pot. I'm pulling out my jars from sanitizing in the hot water bath canner, preheating, and I'm reserving this water on the inside that I put in there to help weigh them down into the sink for cleaning up. I always have the tea kettle hot in case I need to add any more water to the tops. And of course, you've always got your water pot from your lids and fans. They have also been scalded with hot water and they've been sitting. That softens the rubber seal that's on the top to get it ready for canning. I know some people like to pull out one jar at a time, and I find it works better for me to just work quickly. So, quite often I have everything set up assembly line so that I can just keep going from one process to the next. So I've got my funnel, my lid lifter, my lids and bands, and I'm just going to start filling these up, 1/2 inch headspace per jar. And I had my applesauce on low so that it would not boil. And I just dip my big measuring cup right into the pot. The crock pot's full with another batch of applesauce so that that is staying hot, and I just put that on warm. That way I can continue on with more apples. Now I processed 2 5-gallon buckets of apples today. It takes 21 pounds of apples to get 7 quart jars. So keep that in mind. We're a family of 7, so I always can in quart jars. You can pressure can in 1/2 gallon jars, but they are too large for the water bath canner to be an inch or 2 underwater. They take up all the space. So the quart jars work really well for us. One boy, he's 17, can sit down and devour an entire quart of applesauce in one setting by himself. And this applesauce is nice and thin. I have caught my children with straws sucking down my applesauce in the past, which I don't like because it never washes out of the straws. So before we put the lids and bands on these, we will make sure that the tops are clean. If you have any applesauce or stickiness on the tops, you're going to have jars that won't seal. If you fill more than a 1/2 inch headspace, that can give you trouble with sealing. And if you try to reuse any lids and bands, it can give you trouble with sealing. Now, in a pinch, there's other brands, Tatler lids, and the old style ones with a zinc lid and a removable rubber. I don't recommend using those. I don't know enough about them. I just have some for collection that I got from my stepdad, who had saved them from his mother from the 1930s. I have more in my pot and I can't scoop it out. I need another work surface. So I have a very interesting collection and a very old collection of mason jars. One mason jar I have right here says, pick up Mom's mason jar. Now, I like to drink from those, but I'm in a pinch. I'm having to can with it. I like to save those, and I really would hate for something to happen to it. I've seen them for sale for as much as $30 for a quart and about $25 for a pint. And this collection that I got from my mom and secondhand from a farm wife was real interesting to have on hand and see all the different kinds. I have some that say Presto, Genuine Ball. I've got Kerr. So we're going to debubble all of these, then put on the lids and bands, and they're going to go in the water bath canner for 10 minutes. Now I'm at below 1,000 feet altitude. If you are higher than that, double check like the USDA canning guidelines. No lemon, no vinegar, nothing added to this. Like I said, if you are going to season it with sugar or cinnamon, anything like that, do that before you can. Okay, so time to put the lid on. I've got that set to high temperature. After this comes up to a rolling boil, then we'll set the timer for the 10 minutes. When the 10 minutes is done, You just turn it off, let it set for 5 minutes undisturbed before removing them from the water bath canner. Okay, so my timer, 10 minutes plus 5 for sitting, has gone off, and it's time to start taking the jars out. You want to put these on your countertop where they can be undisturbed for 24 hours on a towel. You don't want to put this hot jar on a cold counter. And if you have high-end countertops, protect them. I really recommend these old farm tables so that you've got another work surface. I have a big L-shaped open kitchen, so I just move them on over and they can sit there. So I was just talking with the kids, and I've got about 4 buckets of pie apples waiting. And I've got a crate of apples and maybe 3 more applesauce buckets. We picked a whole bunch the other day because it was going to frost. And that was just for a few hours. Any extra applesauce in jars, pie apples I can get, it's great. We've also been freezing cider so that we can enjoy cider with like our Thanksgiving dinner, our Christmas dinner. So that's nice to have. We just reuse empty old water jugs or milk jugs that are plastic, fill them all the way full, and put them in the freezer. Then we bring them out to thaw when we're ready. So it's going to be 20 degrees in a couple of days at night for many nights, and in the low 40s for a couple of days. So I want to process as many apples as I can today because I want those buckets so that we can go out and get a refill so that we have enough. 7 jars of applesauce seems like a lot, but when you have a family of 7, I can open 2 to 2.5 jars, quart-sized jars, to feed our family for one sitting for lunch. And like I said, the older boys, they can sit down with an entire jar all at once. Okay, so here are my beautiful applesauce jars sitting and cooling. I'm going to keep them covered with a towel to make sure that they don't get any drafts today. And with the canning, it's getting very warm in this house. So I'm going to have the ceiling fan on, the windows, the breezeway door open, and we're going to let a little bit of that damp air circulate in here. And you can't let any drafts, cold or otherwise, hitting your jars because it can actually shock them and make them crack. And if it were to like crack right open on your countertop, that's going to be a big mess I don't want to have to deal with. I've never had it happen, but I've always taken these steps of caution, putting them on a towel, covering them up with a towel, and leaving them undisturbed for a day. So as you saw, I got another batch of jars ready and in the canner. I had to add more water and get that up to temperature before I added the jars, and I still was short an inch to have it 2 inches high. If it's like a half an inch, it's almost an inch. It's just not enough for my security, so I wanted to go ahead and add that. So I had boiled another pot of water to pour on top before I set them down into it, and let that water mix right up and get up to a good hot temperature. So adding extra water, because now my second batch is only at 4 jars. Total, I am ending up with 12 jars. That's really great. I'm actually going to stop for lunch, process my zucchini because I keep putting it off, and I got to get it done. I processed a bunch, put it in the freezer, but I want to try mock pineapple, where you chop it up and put canned pineapple juice on it. We've never done it before. We basically eat pineapple straight from a can or raw, or use it in smoothies. So I'm just going to do a couple of them that way and shred the rest for the freezer, because we're constantly making banana bread and having to run to the store in the wintertime for banana bread. And I said if I could replace that cost of bananas with stuff from the garden like zucchini, pumpkin, I'm going to do it. So more in that prepping and homesteading and getting away from going to the grocery store. So these 4 are underwater, a couple of minutes left on them, let them cool, and it's on to the next thing. While I'm doing my next thing, you can hit up that playlist and you can go back and you can see that applesauce apple butter video. That might be one more thing I might be getting done today, but I'm trying to use as many pots in this house today as I can to just kind of keep things going while I took this rain day off. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.